Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. Lachlan Frost stood at the window of his study, his gaze crossing the bustling skyline of Boston and landing on the sparkling waters of the Charles River in the distance. An internationally acclaimed best-selling author, he once thought he had insight into human nature and was able to portray life's tiniest emotional swings. However, at the moment, he felt confused, as if he was faced with an unsolvable puzzle. The puzzle is his wife, Thalia Evergreen. Thalia is a well-known figure in the Boston art scene and runs a high-end gallery. She was elegant, intelligent, and had a keen eye for art. It was this talent that made Lachlan fall deeply in love with her 20 years ago. Over the past year, however, Thalia's behavior has become increasingly strange to Lachlan. At first, the changes were subtle. Thalia began attending art events and social dinners more frequently. Lachlan doesn't take it personally, believing it's just what she needs to advance her career. But as time goes on, Thalia's behavior becomes more and more disturbing to him. "Honey, are you going out again tonight?" Lachlan stood in the bedroom doorway, watching Thalia get all dressed up. Thalia said without looking back, "Yes, there's an important exhibition opening. I may be late, so don't wait for me." Lachlan noticed a hint of impatience in Thalia's tone. He tried to say something, but in the end just sighed and turned away. Conversations like this have become more frequent over the past few months. Lachlan begins to notice other changes in Thalia. She becomes extremely dependent on her cell phone and often leaves the room in a hurry when she receives a text message. She begins to spend more time dressing up and buying new clothes. And most disturbing to Lachlan, Thalia's attitude toward him grows cold and even seems detached at times. Lachlan sat in his study one evening after Thalia had gone out once again, the doubts in his mind finally too much to contain. He turned on his computer and started searching for keywords such as change in wife's behavior and signs of extramarital affair. Each message was like a sharp blade, piercing his heart. "No, that's not possible." Lachlan shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts in his head. But the seeds of doubt had been planted and began to take root in his mind. Over the next few weeks, Lachlan began to pay more attention to Thalia's every move. He noticed that she was often close to a young art dealer named Jasper Hawthorne. Every time Jasper's name is mentioned, Thalia's eyes sparkle with a different kind of brilliance. Lachlan tries to communicate with Thalia, but every conversation ends in an argument. "You've been distracted lately," Lachlan said at one of the dinners. "Are you working too much?" Thalia put down her knife and fork and said impatiently, "I've been busy, you're just noticing now." "I'm just worried about you," Lachlan tried to stay calm. "You've been getting close to that Jasper lately, and I—" "Enough!" Thalia suddenly raised her voice. "Are you doubting me? After all the years we've known each other, you don't trust me?" Lachlan was shocked by Thalia's reaction. He tried to explain, but Thalia had already gotten up and left the table. As the days pass, the distance between Lachlan and Thalia grows. Their conversations became short and raw, as if two strangers were forced to live under the same roof. Lachlan begins to wonder if he really knows his wife and if their marriage is just an elaborate lie. Finally, on a rainy Sunday morning, Thalia sat on the couch in the living room and calmly said to Lachlan, "We need to talk." Lachlan's heart sank. He knew that the moment had finally arrived. "I think we should get a divorce," Thalia said, not a waver in her voice. "We don't have anything in common anymore." Lachlan felt a wave of vertigo. Despite his premonition, he still felt thunderstruck when he actually heard those words. "Is it because of Jasper?" Lachlan asked with difficulty. Thalia's expression instantly turned to surprise, then to anger. "How dare you?" she snapped. "You've been doubting me all this time?" It's at this point that Lachlan pulls out the evidence he's collected. Records of Thalia and Jasper's text messages, photos of them talking intimately at an art show, records of Thalia's late-night outings. "I didn't want this," Lachlan said, pain in his voice, "but you gave me no choice." Thalia looked at the evidence, and her face instantly turned pale. She tried to argue, but words failed her. Eventually, She broke down and admitted to her affair with Jasper. I, I don't know what to say, Thalia whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. Lachlan felt a strong sense of anger and betrayal surge through him. You want me to move out? He asked coldly. Thalia nodded, but Lachlan flatly refused. This is my home, he said firmly. If you want to be with Jasper, you move out. For the next few days, Lachlan and Thalia live under the same roof as strangers. Lachlan began to think about what to do next. He knew that a tough divorce battle was about to begin, and he needed to be well prepared. In the midst of this marital battle, Lachlan decides to stop being the understanding husband. He was going to fight for himself, for everything they had ever had. He began contacting lawyers to gather more evidence in preparation for fighting for what he deserved in court. And Thalia, once such a perfect wife in his eyes, is now a stranger. Lachlan doesn't know what the future holds, but he knows that no matter what, he has to be strong in the face of it all. As night fell, Lachlan stood alone at the window of his study, looking out at the lights of Boston. He realized that this was not just the end of a marriage, but a turning point in his life. No matter how hard it was ahead, he had to be brave enough to take the next step. Lachlan Frost stood in front of the wide floor-to-ceiling windows of his law office, overlooking the busy streets of Boston. His eyes followed the pedestrians hurrying by, but his mind was in waves. Over the past few weeks, he had been through some of the toughest moments of his life, but at this moment, he felt a determination surge through him like never before. Mr. Frost, came a deep female voice from behind him. Let's get started. Lachlan turned to face his attorney, Veronica Blackwood. Veronica is one of Boston's most recognized divorce attorneys, known for her sharp tactics and uncompromising attitude. Tell me, Ms. Blackwood, Lachlan spoke slowly. What are our chances of winning? Veronica's mouth curled into a confident smile. With the evidence you provided, our chances of winning are quite good. But, Mr. Frost, you have to understand that it's going to be an uphill battle. Lachlan nodded, a determined gleam in his eye. He recalled every piece of evidence he'd gathered over the past few weeks. Thalia's flirty texts with Jasper, the photos of them meeting secretly at the back door of the gallery, the phone records of Thalia's late-night outings. Each piece of evidence was like a sharp blade, gouging out the last shred of hesitation in his mind. I understand. Lachlan took a deep breath. I'm ready. Over the next few hours, Lachlan and Veronica discussed litigation strategy in detail. By the time he stepped out of the lawyer's office, night had fallen and the neon lights of the city had begun to flicker. Lachlan stood on the sidewalk, feeling the cool night breeze on his face, his mind filled with mixed emotions. Back at home, Lachlan sat in his study, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He knew that what he was about to do next could change everything forever, but he had no choice. Taking a deep breath, he began composing an email to send evidence of Thalia's cheating to her family and friends. With each press of the send button, Lachlan could feel a rush of emotions intertwined with pain and relief. He knew the email would be a huge blow to Thalia, but at the same time, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For years, he had been the understanding, accommodating husband, and now he was finally standing up for himself. The next morning, Lachlan wakes up to find the whole house unusually quiet. He walked downstairs and saw Thalia sitting in the living room, pale and with red eyes. She looked up at him with anger and shame in her eyes. How could you do this? Thalia's voice was hoarse. You ruined everything for me. Lachlan looked at her calmly, a wave of mixed emotions welling up in his mind. He had once loved this woman dearly, but now he felt only a deep sense of disappointment and exhaustion. No, Thalia, he said softly. You're the one who ruined everything. I'm just letting the truth come out. Thalia stood up suddenly, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm moving out, she said, her voice trembling. I can't stay here anymore. Lachlan nodded. I think it's for the best. Over the next few days, Lachlan began to take more action. He froze joint accounts and cut off Thalia's financial resources. He knew it might seem cruel, but Veronica told him it was a necessary step to protect his interests. However, the toughest part is yet to come. Lachlan decides to put pressure on Jasper, Thalia's lover. He contacted the owner of the gallery where Jasper worked and revealed the illicit relationship. He knew it might hurt Jasper standing in the art world, but he didn't care. In his opinion, this is the punishment Jasper deserves. One day, Lachlan stood in the center of his bedroom, his eyes burning with a coldness and anger he had never felt before. He pulled open the closet door roughly, and Thalia's carefully collected clothing instantly came into view. Expensive designer clothes, sparkling jewelry, each of which had been a testament to their life together, were now sharp blades that stung him. "Bitch," Lachlan cursed under his breath, grabbing Thalia's favorite Chanel dress and shoving it unmercifully into a garbage bag. He remembered the way Thalia had worn the dress to the art show, and how she had smiled at the compliments of the crowd while Jasper, who had been there at the time, had gazed at her with a smoldering gaze. Anger drove Lachlan's every move. He rudely ripped Thalia's clothes off the hangers one by one and casually tossed them into a garbage bag. The fine silk shirts, the handmade customized suit jackets, and those valuable shoes were all treated as if they were trash. "Dad, what are you doing?" Emily's voice came from the doorway with a hint of panic. Lachlan turned to see his daughter's shocked expression. A flicker of guilt flashed in his eyes, but was quickly replaced by anger. "I'm cleaning out the trash," he said coldly, "and your mom won't be needing that anymore." Emily's eyes widened as she watched her father continue his cleanup. Lachlan even picked up Thalia's wedding ring and their wedding picture and threw them in a garbage bag without hesitation. "Enough! Daddy, please stop!" Emily cried, rushing forward. Lachlan froze as he looked at the pained expression on his daughter's face and suddenly realized how crazy he had acted. But he had been unable to stop, and anger and humiliation drove him to continue this act of revenge. "Emily, go to your room," he ordered, with a coldness in his voice that his daughter had never heard before. "This is none of your business." Emily took a few steps back, tears welling up in her eyes. She took one last look at her father and ran out of the room. Lachlan continued his work by stuffing all of Thalia's personal belongings into several large garbage bags. He even found Thalia's diary and photo albums and didn't hesitate to add them to the pile of trash. When it was all over, Lachlan stood in the middle of a pile of black garbage bags, breathing heavily. He looked around. The room that once smelled like Thalia now seemed empty, just like his insides. He dragged these heavy garbage bags downstairs and roughly threw them into the trunk of his car. On the drive, Lachlan's mind kept replaying images of Thalia and Jasper together, which strengthened his resolve. Finally, he reached the floor of Jasper's apartment. Lachlan dragged the garbage bag up the stairs, each step filled with determination. He stood in front of Jasper's door and took a deep breath before beginning his final move. He rips open a garbage bag and scatters Thalia's clothes and jewelry on Jasper's doorstep. Those expensive fabrics stung on the dirty hallway floor. Lachlan even hangs Thalia's underwear on the doorknob, displaying her privacy in the most humiliating way possible. Finally, he pulled out a note that read, "Enjoy your spoils, and don't forget that this is the price of betrayal." He nails the note to the door, securing it with Thalia's favorite brooch. Lachlan stood there, looking at the sight. He knew how humiliated and agonized Thalia would feel when she saw this. But at the moment, all he felt was a twisted sense of satisfaction. "Goodbye, Thalia," he whispered, his voice filled with pain and resentment. "I hope this will help you remember that you lost more than just a husband." Lachlan turned away, leaving behind this silent, humiliating indictment. He knew that from this moment on, everything between them would cease to exist. It's not only a punishment for Thalia, but a final goodbye to the love they once had. A few days later, Lachlan arrived at his son's soccer game. He saw from a distance that Thalia had come with their daughter and a friend as well. Lachlan felt a surge of anger when Thalia tried to stop her daughter from sitting with him. He walked toward the bleachers and looked Thalia straight in the eye. "This is a public place," he said calmly, "and you can't stop me from being with my child." The daughter hesitated, then ran to Lachlan and hugged him tightly. Lachlan felt a warmth well up in his heart as he felt his daughter's hug. He knew that no matter what the future held, he would be strong for his children. Sitting in the stands, Lachlan watched his son running around the field, his thoughts racing. He knew that the next few days would still be difficult, but he was determined to get everything he and his children deserved. As night fell, Lachlan drove the children home. On the way, he listens to the old songs playing on the radio and remembers a bit about when he and Thalia fell in love. Those fond memories seem so distant now, as if they happened in another world. Back home, Lachlan stood at his study window, watching the lights in the distance. He knew that this was just the beginning of a long legal battle, but he was ready. No matter how many difficulties lie ahead, he will face them with strength. Because now, he's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting for the future of his children. It was late at night, and Lachlan lay in bed, listening to the occasional sound of a car outside his window. He closed his eyes, and Thalia's face came to mind. There was a time when that face represented everything that was best in his life. And now it brings only pain and betrayal. Fall comes extraordinarily early in Boston. Lachlan Frost stood in front of his home's wide floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the maple trees in his yard begin to yellow. There was a time when he and Thalia would go out to see the maple leaves together during the season and enjoy their own romantic time together. And now those memories are only bitter. The ringing phone interrupted Lachlan's thoughts. It's his lawyer, Veronica Blackwood. "Mr. Frost," Veronica's voice came through the receiver. "I was contacted by Thalia's attorney. They want to reconcile." Lachlan took a deep breath and felt a wave of mixed emotions rush over him. He knew this day would come eventually, but when he actually faced it, he realized he wasn't quite ready for it. What did they offer? Lachlan tried to keep his voice calm. "They want an equal share of the property, including your Boston house, the art collection, and—" Veronica paused. "The copyright proceeds of all your works. In addition, they are asking you to pay half of Thalia's income as permanent alimony." Lachlan felt a surge of anger. His hard-earned work, once an accomplishment he was proud of, is now a bargaining chip. "This is too much," Lachlan said through gritted teeth. "She betrayed me, and now she wants to take everything I have?" "Calm down, Mr. Frost." Veronica's voice remained steady. "That's just their opening bid. We can fight back." After hanging up the phone, Lachlan sat down in the leather chair in his study and closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. He thought about the past few months, the betrayal of Thalia, his anger and revenge, and now this seemingly never-ending legal battle. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Lachlan opens the door to find Thalia standing in the doorway. She looked much more haggard, her once sparkling eyes now covered in fatigue. "We need to talk," Thalia said, a hint of pleading in her voice. Lachlan hesitated, but eventually let her in. There was awkwardness and tension in the air as they sat in the living room they had once decorated together. "Lachlan," Thalia spoke, "I know I hurt you, but do we really have to go this far? That's the end of a 20-year marriage." Lachlan looked at Thalia and felt a pang of heartache. Once, he thought they would grow old together. But now, it was as if a stranger was sitting across from him. "You made your choice a long time ago, Thalia," Lachlan said calmly. "The moment you decided to betray me, our marriage was over." Thalia's eyes flashed with pain, but quickly regained their composure. "My lawyer said we could negotiate the terms of the divorce privately. It's better for all of us." Lachlan sneered. "You mean good for you, don't you, Thalia? Do you really think you can take everything from me? It's not fair." Thalia suddenly raised her voice. "I've given 20 years to this family. I'm entitled to my fair share." Lachlan stands up and walks over to the window. He looked out at the maple trees and remembered all those fall days they had shared. Those fond memories are now becoming so ironic. "You're right, Thalia." Lachlan turned and looked her straight in the eye. "You do deserve your fair share. But by no means are these what you are asking for now." For the next few hours they argued. About property, about alimony, about their shared past and separate futures. Lachlan felt exhausted when Thalia finally left. The next day, Lachlan decided to take the divorce action to the Boston court. He knew this meant a protracted legal battle was about to begin, but he had no choice. In the courtroom, Lachlan watched as Thalia sat across from him. She looked still elegant in a modest black suit, but Lachlan could see the fear and unease in her eyes. As the judge read the lawsuit, Lachlan's thoughts drifted back to their first date the night they proposed their wedding. All those once fond memories are now bitter evidence that their marriage is beyond repair. The trial lasted several hours. Lachlan's attorney showed evidence of Thalia's cheating, while Thalia's attorney emphasized her contribution to the family. When Lachlan was called to testify, he stood on the witness stand and felt his whole body tense up. "Mr. Frost," asked opposing counsel, "have you ever neglected your wife?" Lachlan took a deep breath and thought back to days gone by. It's true that he neglects Thalia because he's busy at work, but does that justify her betrayal? "I may be too focused on work sometimes," Lachlan replies honestly, "but I never stopped loving her." After the trial, Lachlan walked alone on the streets of Boston. The fall wind blew against his face, bringing a hint of coolness. He remembered the look on Thalia's face in court, that mixture of remorse and stubbornness. He suddenly realized that no matter what the outcome of this lawsuit was, they had lost the most precious thing of all, their trust and love for each other. Back at home, Lachlan stood in his study and looked around. A photo of him and Thalia hangs on the wall, and shelves are lined with artwork they've collected together. This once loving home now seems so empty. Lachlan walks over to his desk, picks up a pen, and begins to write. Writing has always been his way of releasing his emotions. He wrote their story, from meeting to love, from happiness to betrayal. Each word was like a scar on his heart, but at the same time it brought a strange sense of healing. It's late at night, and Lachlan puts down his pen and walks to the window. Boston's nightscape shimmered in the distance, while his heart lingered. He knows that he will have to continue this difficult battle when the sun rises tomorrow. But for the moment, in the silence of the night, he allowed himself to wallow in memories and sorrow. Because only by truly confronting these emotions can he finally let go and start his life over. Lachlan takes a deep breath and looks out the window at the moonlight. He knew that no matter how hard it was ahead of him, he would be strong. Because now, he's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting to find himself again. Lachlan took a deep breath, trying to calm the waves inside. He knew that tomorrow would be a new day, bringing new challenges. But for the moment, on this quiet night, he allowed himself to briefly wallow in his grief. Because only by truly confronting these emotions can he finally let go and start over. Winter came earlier than usual in Boston. Lachlan Frost stood in front of the home they had once shared and watched the exhaled white breath condense in the cold air. The place he once called home is now nothing but a suffocating memory. "I think it's time," Lachlan whispered to himself. A few days ago, on the advice of his lawyer, Lachlan made a decision. He was moving out. Not by giving in to Thalia's demands, but for her own mental health. Even though Thalia has moved out to her friend's house, the house full of memories remains an emotional burden for Lachlan. Lachlan drove toward a Boston suburb where a single-family house he had just purchased was located. When he first saw the house, he was drawn to its spacious studio and private garden. This would be the beginning of his new life. The car pulled up in front of his new home, and Lachlan took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The cold wind was pounding his face, but he felt a strange sense of relief. He stood on the porch, pulled out his key, hesitated, then turned the lock. "Welcome home, Lachlan," he whispered to himself, a hint of bitterness and anticipation in his voice. The new home was still empty, with only a few simple pieces of furniture. Lachlan walks into the studio as sunlight pours in through the large windows, illuminating the room. He stroked the wall lightly, his mind already beginning to conceptualize how to set up the space. It would become a place for him to create, away from the haze of the past. Just then, the phone vibrated. Lachlan looked over, and it was Thalia. He hesitated, but eventually picked up the phone. "Lachlan." Thalia's voice came through the receiver with a hint of exhaustion. "I heard you moved out?" Lachlan closed his eyes and tried to control his emotions. "Yes, Thalia. I think we all need some fresh starts." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Then Thalia whispered, "Can we meet and talk? Maybe there's still room for us to redeem ourselves." Lachlan felt his heart contract violently. There was a time when how he wished to hear that. But now, those words only made him tired. "Thalia," he said calmly, There is nothing more to be said between us. Please respect my decision." After hanging up the phone, Lachlan sat on the floor of his new home and watched the sunlight create patterns on the floor. He knew that rejecting Thalia's reconciliation was the right decision, but that didn't mean it wasn't painful. Over the next few days, Lachlan devoted himself to setting up his new home. He shopped for furniture, set up his studio, and even started planting some flowers in his backyard garden. These menial chores gave him a new sense of purpose and helped him slowly emerge from the haze of the past. On the third Friday night after the move, Lachlan worked up the courage to try dating for the first time. He met Adrienne, a college professor, in a quiet restaurant. As they talked, Lachlan was surprised to find himself able to feel that ease and pleasure again. "You know," Adrienne said with a smile at the end of dinner, "this has been one of the most enjoyable evenings I've had in a long time." Lachlan looked into Adrienne's eyes and felt something slowly melt in his heart. "So do I," he said sincerely. On the way home, Lachlan drives past the home he and Thalia once shared. Lights were on in the house, and he knew Thalia had recently moved back. The realization made him feel a twinge of discomfort, but it was quickly washed away by the pleasure of tonight's date. The next morning, Lachlan sat on the balcony of his new home, enjoying the early morning sun and a hot cup of coffee. He opened his laptop and began a new day of writing. It's a new habit he started when he moved, using writing to clear his mind early every morning. It was at this point that he received an email from his attorney, Veronica. Thalia agreed to most of their proposed terms, including property division and child custody. Lachlan stared at the screen and felt a wave of relief. "It's finally coming to an end," he said softly, his voice laced with mixed emotions. That afternoon, Lachlan received a call from his oldest daughter, Emily. "Daddy," Emily said with excitement in her voice, "can I come and stay at your new house for a while?" Lachlan felt a warmth well up in his heart. "Of course, my dear. You're welcome anytime." After hanging up the phone, Lachlan stood in front of the window, looking at the recently planted flowers and plants in the yard. He suddenly realized that despite all the pain, life went on. New hope is budding. That night, Lachlan sat down at his desk and began writing a letter to Thalia. He knew their relationship would never go back to the way it was, but maybe they could find a new way to get along. After all, they have children to raise together. "Dear Thalia," he wrote, "I hope you find the happiness that is yours. Even though our marriage is over, we are still parents to our children. Let's learn how to be friends for their sake." After writing the letter, Lachlan went to the window and looked at the night view of Boston. He felt a peace within him that had been missing for a long time. He knows that the future is still full of challenges, but he is ready for a new life. On this cold winter night, Lachlan Frost finally feels the breath of spring. He knew he had the courage to face whatever awaited him ahead. Because now, he's not just living for himself, he's living to find meaning in his life again. Spring is late in Boston, but when it finally arrives, the entire city is revitalized. Lachlan Frost stood in the backyard of his new home, looking at the freshly planted rose seedlings with hope in his heart. 6 months have passed since he and Thalia officially divorced. In those 6 months, Lachlan experienced the biggest transition of his life. Not only has he adapted to his role as a single father, but he has also rediscovered his passion for creativity. His new book, Broken and Reborn, is climbing the bestseller lists. Just then, his cell phone rang. It's his fiancée, Adrienne. "Honey," Adrienne's voice was full of joy. "I just talked to Emily, and she said she's looking forward to family dinner tonight." Lachlan smiles and says, "Great. I've already started preparing dinner." After hanging up the phone, Lachlan went into the kitchen and began preparing for the evening's family gathering. All 4 of their children, Lachlan's 2 daughters and Adrienne's 2 daughters, will be in attendance. This newly formed family is a little complicated, but full of love and understanding. Just as Lachlan is busy in the kitchen, he remembers what happened last week. He bumped into Thalia at the supermarket, the first time they'd seen each other since the divorce. Thalia looked much thinner, with a tired look in her eyes. She tries to strike up a conversation with Lachlan, but the atmosphere is unusually awkward. "You look nice," Thalia said reluctantly. Lachlan nods, "Thanks. Are you okay?" Thalia lowers her head still, adapting. In that moment, a complex emotion welled up in Lachlan's mind. He felt both bad for Thalia and glad that he was out of the gloom. Memories were interrupted by the doorbell. Lachlan opens the door to see his oldest daughter, Emily, standing in the doorway with a big smile on her face. "Daddy!" Emily jumped into Lachlan's arms. "I missed you so much." Lachlan held his daughter close, feeling the most precious warmth in his life. "I miss you too, baby." At dinner, Lachlan looked around at the newly formed family. Adrienne is discussing college life with Emily, while the other three girls are enthusiastically discussing upcoming summer vacation plans. Lachlan felt a surge of happiness come over him. However, just then, Emily suddenly asked, "Dad, how's Mom doing these days? I heard that there are some problems." The room was instantly quiet. Lachlan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Your mom is going through some hard times. We should give her some space and time." Emily nodded, a flash of concern in her eyes. Lachlan knows that despite his fresh start, the shadow of the past still hangs over his children. After dinner, when the kids had all gone to the living room to watch a movie, Adrienne walked over to Lachlan and gently held his hand. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Lachlan looked into Adrienne's eyes and felt a rush of warmth. "I'm fine," he said sincerely. "I feel like I can face anything with you around." The next morning, Lachlan worked in his study as usual. Suddenly, he gets a text from Thalia. "Lachlan, I need to talk to you." "About the kids." Lachlan stared at his cell phone screen and felt a pang of unease. He knows Thalia has been having some problems lately. She lost her job at the gallery and started drinking. The children told him that she was becoming more and more unstable. After much deliberation, Lachlan decided to meet Thalia. They had an appointment at a cafe in Neutral Place. Thalia was already there when Lachlan arrived. She looked even more haggard than the last time we met at the supermarket. "Thank you for wanting to see me," Thalia said, a hint of tremor in her voice. Lachlan nodded. "What do you want to talk about?" Thalia took a deep breath. I want to ask for your help. I know I'm not qualified, but for the sake of the kids." Over the next hour, Thalia confessed all the problems she was facing. Unemployment, alcoholism, depression. She pleads with Lachlan to give her a chance to be a good mother again. Lachlan listened quietly, his mind a mix of emotions. He thought of all the years they had spent together and what a wonderful mother she had been. Finally, Lachlan said, "Thalia, I can't make decisions for the kids. But if you really want to change, I'll support you." For the children. As he left the cafe, Lachlan felt a strange sense of relief. He knew that whether or not Thalia was eventually able to get back on her feet, he had forgiven her and himself. Back home, Lachlan sees Adrienne watering the roses in the backyard. The sunlight poured over her blonde hair, making her whole body seem to glow. Lachlan stepped forward and hugged her gently from behind. "I love you," he whispered in her ear. Adrienne turned and kissed him tenderly. "I love you too," she said, "forever." In that moment, Lachlan knew that whatever challenges awaited him in the future, he had found true happiness. His new book, his children, his Adrienne, these are the most precious gifts in his life. Standing in the backyard, watching the Boston sunshine flood the garden, Lachlan Frost breathed deeply of the spring air. He knows that life is like this garden that needs to be constantly tilled and irrigated. And he, for one, is ready for each new season. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.